What's the funniest comeback you've ever heard? This happened during my senior year of high school in our AP history class. Our teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was this sweet older lady who never raised her voice and always gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. But there was this kid in our class, Tyler, who thought he was the funniest person alive. He'd constantly interrupt lessons with these sarcastic comments and would argue with Mrs. Patterson about everything just to get a laugh from his buddies. Tyler was one of those guys who peaked in high school. Captain of the lacrosse team, dated the head cheerleader, drove his dad's BMW to school every day. He had this attitude like the world owed him something. Most of the time, Mrs. Patterson would just ignore his comments or give him a gentle reminder to pay attention. She never wanted to embarrass anyone in front of the class. But Tyler kept pushing it further and further. He'd make jokes about her age, roll his eyes dramatically when she'd explain historical events, and once he even fell asleep during a lesson about World War II. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. We were discussing the Great Depression, and Mrs. Patterson was explaining how families had to make difficult choices about spending money on basic necessities. Tyler raised his hand and said, "Yeah, but why didn't they just use their credit cards or ask their parents for money?" The whole class went quiet. Even Tyler's usual supporters looked uncomfortable. This wasn't just being disrespectful. It showed he'd learned absolutely nothing all semester. Mrs. Patterson stopped writing on the whiteboard and turned around slowly. She had this look on her face I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, but something had definitely shifted. "Tyler," she said in her usual calm voice, "that's an interesting question. It shows you've been paying close attention to our discussions about economic systems and family structures during the 1930s. Tyler grinned, thinking he was about to get praised for participating. His buddies were already starting to snicker. Mrs. Patterson continued, "Of course, credit cards as we know them today weren't widely available until the 1950s, and many families during the Depression were supporting their own parents who had lost their life savings when the banks failed." She paused, still speaking in that same sweet, patient tone. "But I'm curious about your solution. When you suggest people should have just asked their parents for money, are you speaking from personal experience? Because I've noticed you're wearing a different designer outfit every day, you drive a car that costs more than most teachers make in a year, and last week you mentioned your spring break trip to Europe." The classroom was dead silent now. Tyler's smug expression started to fade. Mrs. Patterson wasn't done. "So when you say people should just ask their parents for money, you're absolutely right. That's clearly been a very effective strategy for you. In fact, I'd say you're probably our class expert on depending on your parents financially." She turned back to the whiteboard and continued writing. "The difference is, during the Great Depression, most parents didn't have money to give. But I can see how that might be hard to understand if you've never experienced financial independence yourself." Tyler's face turned bright red. A few people in the back started laughing, but quickly stopped when Mrs. Patterson gave them a look. Now, as I was saying about the economic factors that led to widespread unemployment, she just went right back to teaching like nothing had happened. But Tyler didn't say another word for the rest of class. Actually, he barely spoke up for the rest of the semester. The best part was how she delivered it. No yelling, no sarcasm, just stated the facts in the most polite way possible. She basically called him a spoiled rich kid who'd never worked a day in his life without ever changing her tone. After class, everyone was talking about it in the hallways. Even Tyler's friends were like, "Dude, she totally got you." Tyler tried to play it off like he didn't care, but you could tell he was embarrassed. For the first time in his life, someone had called him out on his attitude in front of everyone. The funny thing is, Mrs. Patterson never brought it up again. She continued being just as nice and patient with Tyler as she was with everyone else. But he definitely showed her more respect after that. Years later, I ran into Tyler at a coffee shop. He was working there part-time while going to community college. When he saw me, he actually brought up that day in history class. "Mrs. Patterson really humbled me with that comeback," he said. "I was being such a jerk, and she put me in my place without even being mean about it." He said it was the first time an adult had ever called him out for his behavior, and it made him realize how entitled he'd been acting.